Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. Click subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, pretty much wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find the Sonic Cinema Podcast. You can also check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. There you'll get series like Leaving the Collection and Life Soundtrack. You'll also get stuff like Oscar nomination discussions, discussions on short film blogs on the Atlanta Film Festival, and more. That is at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. So the past couple of years, we've been mainly focusing on one series that is very topical in American politics, which is my Fascism in Cinema series. We are going to actually take a step away from that one and go to one that we started a few years ago and has been on the back burner for a couple of years. I'm glad to be continuing it with this one. Hopefully we'll have more in the future, and that is our Established Classics series. If you don't recall what this one is, basically we are looking at movies from the golden age of Hollywood, basically essentially from the 40s to 60s. I think we've had some 30s films in there as well, but basically it's from the 40s to 1960. We're looking at three films, each by a different filmmaker, and going to be talking about them and whether they hold up now. Joining me is the guest who's been joining me for this entire series, actor Timothy J. Cox. Tim, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be back again.
So we have not really had time to talk. It's been a couple of years since we've had you on the pod. What is going on with you as an actor?
Well, right now, I just did a film a couple of months ago. I'm in Ohio now, and I did a film for a film festival, the Winter Film Festival, called Unfortunate Fortune, which is kind of a Twilight Zone kind of piece, and it was written by and directed by Adam and Ryan Daly, about a man who just down on his luck. And, out of a job, his marriage has crumbled and no prospects. And he goes to see I'm blanking on the word. Sorry, I'm in the process of moving to a new home, so my mind was a little flustered. But he goes to get good luck. And of course, there's a saying that, good luck has a way of smiling on some, but being very, deceptive to others. And so he goes to, God, I'm blanking on what he goes to see to get a fortune teller. Oh my God, yeah, he goes to see a fortune teller, and he immediately gets swept up in the idea that he's destined to have this good luck. He's destined to think that he's going to win $5 million, and then he's going to get his wife back, and then he's going to get his job, his life back together, all because this fortune teller told him some clues. And of course, it does not go the way that he thinks. And but no, it was a lot of fun to work on, and it was a very enjoyable experience. And between that, I'm still trying to get the films that I've written and acted after Hard Truths, Sundays with Dad, Good Luck to Me, and Let Dan Go, all produced by the same wonderful Columbus, Ohio-based production company, Awesome Films, trying to get them out there to the world, trying to get as many eyes on them as possible, and with festivals and other critics and things like that. So. But other than that, my family and I, we are moving from our home in Bellbrook, Ohio, to about 15, 20 minutes away to Kettering, Ohio, to a much bigger home. And of course, my son is happy because it is now within walking distance to a playground. So,
That's always a good thing.
It's a must.
Always a good thing.
It's an absolute must. So I'm happy to be here. I've taken a little break from packing and unpacking to chat about three amazing classic films.
And three amazing classic filmmakers too. You know, it's funny because of the fact that yeah, the premise that you laid out there very much sounds very Twilight Zone esque. And I mean, one of the things I've been doing this year is watching the OG Twilight Zone series. And yeah, it's fascinating seeing how all of those films essentially all of those episodes kind of operate in the same way, but it's just the little tweaks and ways in which it plays with the formula that makes it wholly unique. And yeah, that does sound very Twilight Zone esque. So
And
I'll be looking forward to watch it.
And the thing about the Twilight Zone is that, I think it first came on in 1959.
Yeah.
The stories, they still hold up. They
Mm-hmm.
hold beautifully. There's one that Adam Daly told me as kind of a model of the character that I played. There was the episode Everett Sloan. He played a man. He was a very devoutly religious man, and I think he and his wife they won a prize, and they ended up going I think to Las Vegas, and he was against gambling, and then he kind of got into gambling, and then it kind of took a hold of him, like the obsession.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the machine started talking to him. And I mean, of course, it's a very true thing about people who battle an addiction to gambling or alcohol or anything like that. Then Rod Serling, I kind of wonder what Rod Serling would think is going on with the world right now, like him and Ray Bradbury and Patty Chayefsky and all of those incredibly smart writers who were so ahead of their time, but they kind of gave us hints that this is where we were heading.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I've done a couple of science fiction episodes earlier this year. I did one small one where I talked about my love of the genre, and then we had a larger one as part of my fascism and cinema series.
Yeah.
And it's funny because of the fact that it's like you see people make this comment that's like, all of the dystopian science fiction, all of the science fiction that warns against artificial intelligence and all of that stuff. It's like that's not supposed to be a blueprint for billionaires to come up with things to do in the real world. They're meant to be cautionary tales. What are we doing here?
Well, and that's it just makes shows like The Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt and The Outer Limits so they were kind of onto something. So
yeah.
It adds to the kind of the terror, and also when you think of movies like Network and All the President's Men and The Parallax View, I mean movies that are so incredibly smart, and 50 plus years later, they were kind of on the money, really, as far as where we were going.
Yeah, and it's funny because of the fact that I had never seen our first film that we're going to talk about today, and we'll go ahead and get right into it. It's a comedy. It's a wartime comedy from Ernst Lubitsch, who was an European expatriate who came to Hollywood to make movies as World War II was looming. And basically, so the 1942 film we're going to be talking about, To Be or Not to Be, it's funny because it really would have fit in perfectly with the first episode of Fascism in Cinema that I did, which was this idea of resistance of fascism.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's still one that I might actually consider for a future episode in that series. But it's funny because of the fact that this one has been kind of on my radar, not just because it's Lubitsch, but because the great Mel Brooks, who just turned 100, along with some of his friends and Anne Bancroft, who played the Carol Lombard character in the film, remade this back in the 80s. And so it's fascinating because of the fact that, so that kind of been part of why it was on my radar. I still haven't watched the the '80s version because I wanted to see this one first. And this is Jack Benny, Carol Lombard in her last feature. Came out
Yeah.
shortly after she passed away. And they are a married couple of actors who are in late 30s, early 40s Poland. And when the film starts, they are basically workshopping and rehearsing a play, essentially skewering the Nazis, called Gestapo.
Yeah.
And this is right before Germany invades Poland. And so as they get ready as the Germans start to invade Poland, though, they're doing a production of Hamlet. And Jack Benny's character is playing Hamlet. And Carol Lombard has started a fixation with a Polish soldier who gave her flowers. And his cue to go visit her behind in her dressing room during the show is when Hamlet's soliloquy starts, to be or not to be, and that is the cue. And so he is getting up out of the audience when Joseph Turner's character is starting the soliloquy, and he takes it as a personal affront, not knowing the full interpretation of what it means.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, the Germans invade Poland, and they kind of get shut down to a certain extent. And we then see the Polish resistance underground resistance to Germany, and the film essentially becomes kind of a spy movie where there's this spy working for the Nazis that is getting information to members of the resistance, and this theater troupe is brought in through circumstance to help weed out the spy. And it's funny because of the fact that it's such a delightful farce that the performances are amazing. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating that he made this movie right in the middle of World War II.
Oh, right.
This was 1942, so this is very topical at the time. And I love that it takes this initial premise of these characters and it builds something kind of absurd but also really human. This idea that these characters they end up kind of putting their own wants and desires aside to uncover this spy, and the result's absolutely a wonderful film.
Yeah, this is I probably hadn't seen this for 30 odd years because my introduction to this was the Mel Brooks film, which I saw in the 1980s. And then wanting to go back and see this. I remember I'm old enough to remember when this played on AMC when it was just American movie classics. They didn't have Mad Men or Breaking Bad. This was when Bob Dorgan was the host. And it's a wonderful film. But the thing that it is extraordinary that they were able to make this during the war. And it highlights something that I think we've kind of lost today, that even though a black comedy, somehow through all of that, they were able to keep their sense of humor. Yeah. Like to point out and poke fun at the Nazis, who are buffoons in the film. And I remember, when I first saw the film, because I like Jack Benny as a performer, but I never really seen him be an actor, like play a part. And he really is a huge standout. And of course, he's paired with the great Carol Lombard, who left us way too early. But they're marvelous together. And the Mel Brooks version is marvelous as well. But I think you have to go here with the original and take into the fact that they were able to make this. And I don't think it was a hit when it came out, because I think audiences may have thought, might be a little,
Right.
might be too soon. But of course, in the years since, it has become not only a classic as a comedy, but a comedy, of just a classic film, and it's Lubitsch at its best.
Well, and it's funny because of the fact that, I mean, one of those films in that introductory episode of Fascism in Cinema we did was The Great Dictator.
Oh yeah,
And I mean, fantastic film, great iconic film, but yeah, it's something that you kind of got at where it's like the reception at the time. Now, granted, that came out before
1940.
America had entered the war, so we had not really. So at the time, we had not quite become adversaries with Nazi Germany at that time, and certainly there were people who resisted it, but at the same time, it was Chaplin's interpretation of Hitler, and that film rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because of the fact that he was not necessarily a friend to the American government.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can definitely, it's funny because of the fact that I do think, to be or not to be, if you look at within that historical prism, I'm not surprised that it wasn't a hit because of the fact that, I mean, why do you want to be reminded of the war that's currently going on?
Yeah.
And plus, at the time, I feel like we were starting to get inklings of what exactly the Nazis were doing. So, in terms of the concentration camps and the execution of and the Holocaust, and I think that is one of those things where it's like, I think it's appropriate that Lubitsch and his filmmaker and his collaborators made the Nazis buffoonish, and I love the way that Joseph Tura goes full ham when he's playing Nazis. I think it's delightful, and it fits the way his character's been developed perfectly. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I can definitely see audience is thinking at the time, well, this is probably not quite the way it should be. We should be depicting these. It's kind of serious. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, I mean, I think to a certain extent, the more topical to the era, I think that's the more important the film becomes later on. And I mean, this film stands the test of time, not just because of the fact that it was topical at the time, but because of the fact that I think it gets to this idea of, in the same way we talked about Casablanca early on in this series, in this whole idea of finding your own way to kind of fight fascism and be again good triumphing over evil in a lot of ways, and I think this is an example of that type of film.
Well, and this paved the way for the producers, where the best way to deal with that is to completely make fun of them. And in the same way that I haven't seen it yet, but Larry David has a new series about, or I think it's a new series about, the history of the country from his perspective. And yeah, I mean, he pokes fun at the current resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because that's, I mean, very much in the same way that Lubitsch and Mel Brooks, these are, they deserve to be mocked and made fun of, because that's how you deal with that. And I think that's how we get our sense of humor back. I think you know, I think audiences might have been apprehensive about laughing at this when it first came out. And the same thing with the producers. But I think you have to. You have to just because that's our defense against it. And also I have to say, talking more about Jack Benny's performance. Jack Benny had done. I think he'd done a film version of the play Charlie's Aunt, and I don't think it went very well. And the fact that and he was the only choice that Lubitsch wanted for this part. They were throwing bigger Hollywood names, and because Jack Benny was not primarily known as a film actor, he had done radio and stuff like that. And Jack Benny, but he's marvelous in the film, and paired with again with Carol Lombard, who. I think the original choice that Lubitsch wanted was another actress, and I don't think the actress, and I think it was Miriam Hopkins, and I don't think she and Benny got along.
Yeah, that's what I read.
Yeah, and then all of these things, that Carol Lombard, suggested Robert Stack, in one of his earliest film roles, and so it was nice to see him in a film, but no, it holds up. It's still very, very funny and also quite moving at times as well. And so that's a credit to Lubitsch and just the power of a really, really good film like this.
Yeah, I mean it's moving because of the fact. Well, it's moving because of the fact that. Ultimately, even though there's kind of this love triangle with Joseph and Maria, and then the lieutenant, who's played by Robert Stack, ultimately everybody's on board with what needs to happen.
Yeah.
In they're sort of, to paraphrase a quote from Casablanca, their problems don't amount to hill of beans in this crazy world.
Yeah.
Like they have to put their issues aside to basically do what is ultimately the right thing to do. And I love that. In the funniest parts of this movie, I think, are definitely Benny's reactions when Sobinsky, the lieutenant, is walking out of Hamlet. I think both times we see that are quite hilarious. Benny plays them absolutely perfectly.
Yeah.
And then when Benny essentially is roped into the hunt for trying to uncover the Nazi spy, the professor, and so he has to play these different Nazi characters, and the ways in which he makes it out of that situation it's pure farce mechanics that just really, and it's funny because of the fact that, I mean, farce feels like a very lost art form now, especially mainstream movies. I mean, you don't really. I mean, there are parodies and stuff like that, but that's not the same thing.
But full farce, like they've tried to make film versions of, like they made a film version of the classic farce Noises Off with Michael Caine, Peter Bogdanovich directed, and What's Up, Doc, which is an homage to probably one of the greatest farces in film, which is Bringing Up Baby. And that's still a very, very funny film. But farce, mostly, it is a lost art. It's hard to do in film because in theater, audiences are often impressed most with farce, like just the breakneck pace. But in film, you can do that, but you have cut, you have editing and stuff like that. So it's fun. There was a fun farce that came out a couple of years ago that Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan did. I think it was called See How They Run. And that was a lot of fun. Like
Okay.
that was I think it came out like 3 years ago, but
Yeah, it was like 2, 3 years ago. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember it.
but like sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But I think it's a case of having the right actors, the right script, and the right director. I mean, something like
Yeah.
Fish Called Wanda is
Hmm.
I think that's one of the greatest comedy farces ever written for movies. Just
Yeah.
because it has everything. It has romance. It has a brilliant Kevin Kline performance, but kind of like they all kind of owe Ernst Lubitsch, an acknowledgement because I think he kind of opened the door to say that yes, you can make the Nazis, you can't make them farcical because
Yeah.
I mean the alternative is like we look at the newspaper and of course we just kind of like are stunned and saddened, which we are, but also you have to a defense against that is to poke fun at them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm always all for that. So
And that's something that very much Chaplin understood when he did The Great Dictator.
oh
And
yeah.
obviously Mel Brooks when he did The Producers, which you mentioned. You mentioned What's Up, Doc, which is a fantastic example of farce conventions from Bogdanovich, and was always one of my mom's favorite movies. I would also say, as far as more, it's from the '80s, but I think the adaptation of Clue is a great
Yes. Oh my
example
God. How could
is
I
a
forget
great
Clue?
example of modern farce.
Yeah. Definitely that. I mean, Clue is, and now whole new generations of people are finding out about the show, and the film has been adapted into a stage play and a stage
Yeah,
musical. So it still works, and to be or not to be, it still works as well. I would say both Lubitsch's version and Mel Brooks's version are definitely worth checking out. They both have a great cast. The Mel Brooks film features a wonderful comic performance from Charles Durning, and many others. But yeah, no, it's definitely one worth checking out.
yeah. I mean, and like we've talked about with all these films. I know we've talked about bringing up maybe a couple of episodes go on this series, Howard Hawks, and he of course also did His Girl Friday as
Oh
well
yeah.
with Cary Grant. Another fantastic farce. But yeah, I mean, this is it's currently on Criterion Channel, as well as being available to rent and stuff like that. But it is on Criterion Channel if you got that one.
Yeah.
It's eminently watchable, and it's like one of the things I'm so impressed by with filmmakers like Lubitsch, like Hawks at the time, when they were making these movies, is that they understood they understood pacing and maintaining the energy in comedy in a way that I think is part of the reason why farce just largely does not work nowadays, is because so many filmmakers just don't really understand the whole why that manic energy is so important to farce.
Well, and farce, it's all about precision. It's
Yeah,
music, really.
yeah,
When you're doing a farcical play, your timing and rhythm, it's the difference between a kind of laugh and a hearty big laugh. Just because it's and it's like football. It's like 1 inch too much or too short, and but no, this one gets it. This one gets it just right.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I know I have a Blu-ray set of Mel Brooks films that I know To Be or Not to Be is in there, so I'm definitely going to check that out at some point.
Good.
But yeah, this one is on Criterion Channel. I'm so glad I got to it. Now I can go to other Lubitsch films and kind of know what his philosophy is as a filmmaker and with performers and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I know I think we had talked about I think we had originally talked about Trouble in Paradise. when it came to doing a Lubitsch film for this episode, but I think the availability of it was not quite there, so we ended up going with To Be or Not to Be. And I'm glad I did because of the fact that it's one of those things that really made me. It's one of those things that really felt like, yeah, this is an important film to watch in this time and period of American history, and just catching up with film history in general, I think, is important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it's funny because of the fact that we are going to go to another film from the 40s that has somewhat unexpectedly had some relevance or has become a little bit more relevant and over the past decade with the rise of Donald Trump, and that is George Cukor's 1944 film Gaslight. And this is a film that we talked about a couple of years ago on the podcast when it came to Joseph Cotten. We talked about several of his films, but this is George Cukor, who's one of the great filmmakers when it comes to directing women. I know he had that reputation as an actor, and I think we talked about one of his other films in a previous episode. We talked about The Women, which I'm pretty sure was his film too.
I believe so.
Yeah, we talked about when we were talking about MGM movies, and so Gaslight has obviously nowadays, if you're familiar with the term gaslighting, you think about it in terms of somebody intentionally, deliberately lying to you to make you feel like what you're seeing with your own two eyes is not actually happening.
Yeah,
and it's certainly become relevant in the age of Trump, starting in his first term and all the way back to his first run at president. And it's funny because of the fact that one of the things, and the first time I had seen Gaslight was in preparation for this episode, as well as the preparation for the Cotton episode. And the thing that I love about this film is that it's based on a play by Patrick Hamilton in 1938.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically stars Ingrid Bergman as a woman who falls in love with an accompanist that she is playing with. Paula, the Ingrid Bergman character, is a singer. Gregory is an accompanist playing her performances, and they fall in love and they get married. But as the marriage develops, what we see is Gregory is trying to get Paula to believe a degree of reality that just is not happening. And what makes her realize this is the idea of gaslights being turned on and off in the house. And we get a couple of maids in the movie. Wait a minute, Cotton doesn't play the lover. Charles Boyer plays
Charles Boyer.
My bad. Joseph Cotten plays the nephew of Paula's aunt. And he's one of the ones who helps her out of Gregory's clutches. Yeah. But we get two maids. We get Barbara Everest, and then we get Angela Lansbury. And this is the second time you and I have talked about Lansbury, because we talked about Manchurian Candidate a few years ago. And this is, it's funny because of the fact that this is very much a gothic romance. It reminded me a lot of another film we talked about on the podcast, not you and I, but me and somebody else. We talked about Hitchcock's Rebecca. And it has that same feel to me in terms of how it approaches this particular story.
Yeah. The thing of it, this was a wonderful film to revisit, because it's probably been 35 years since I had seen it. And
Hmm.
you know the thing about is Charles Boyer. He's so debonair and he's so dashing and so charming, but incredibly sinister because all of this and he's very persuasive. He's got that and Ingrid Bergman, who won the Oscar for the performance, is it's a performance. It's a tightly controlled performance of, and you watch the eyes, and you
Yeah.
just see her slowly unraveling. And no, this was a nice one to return to. I had actually there was one of the local theaters around here. They were doing a production of Angel Street, which I think is one of the adaptations, the stage adaptations of this play. And Angel Street had been a huge hit in the 1930s in New York with Vincent Price
Oh,
playing
wow.
the role that Charles Boyer had played. And of course, they changed it considerably, George Cukor. But it was interesting seeing the play and knowing, of course, and I think the addition of the maid that Angela Lansbury plays so memorably. I think she was 17 or 18 when she did this. So
Hmm.
to make her film debut. But the thing is, I think this film is it's better because the things that you're able to do with the cinematography and the lighting and it just added so much tension throughout. You're on
Yeah.
edge constantly because you don't know what to believe and what and so Cukor in the film does a really really marvelous job of keeping the audience on the edge of their seat the whole time and you kind of fall for Charles Boyer even though that he's dashing but he's also a murderous criminal and a lot
Hmm.
so
Oh no, he's. I do think he's one of the most insidious characters we've gotten in movies. I love the performance. This is one of the things about all of these movies we're talking about. Just absolutely sterling performances, and I think one of the things that this movie benefits from tremendously, especially when it comes to filmmaking, like you were talking about, is the black and white photography. Because at the time color had not quite taken over. Like
yeah.
even in the 40s, black and white was still predominantly the way most filmmakers shot their movies. And I think it's essential. Like, I mean, yes, this story could obviously work in film in color, but especially with black and white's ability to just for the screen to just go really dim to black, I think is such an important part of that effect of having it in black and white that it's just such a fantastic choice.
Well, and you reference Rebecca, and Rebecca and Gaslight both beautifully shot black and white. The use of with the appropriate lighting and the shadows, it all of that it puts you, the audience, in like a state of like something's going to happen here.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if it were in color, I mean, Cukor and Hitchcock, they were master filmmakers. They would have been able to figure it out, but I think I think you want it in the black and white. Like they're that's why movies like this and Rebecca and Shadow of a Doubt and Double Indemnity. It's why they work. All of the lighting and the the little shadows and little tricks that they use. It really adds something to like telling of the story. It puts you, the audience, in that frame of mind that something's around the corner and you got to be ready for it.
Yeah, and I mean you know that I mean obviously the era of the 40s is where film noir came into the forefront, and while certainly Gaslight does not necessarily fit that bill specifically in terms of the genre. I mean, from a filmmaking standpoint, it really does fit into it. And I mean, so much of the appeal of film noir in those times was the cinematography and the use of black and white to create atmosphere that was very ominous and very intimidating.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now this was fun to come back to again, and the chemistry. Also, again, to speak more about the performances, the chemistry between Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman was wonderful. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
gentle with her but like he kind of was able to play her like the character like a toy, like just play on her sympathies and play on her her vulnerabilities and her sensitivities, and that makes him, like you said, like very insidious, like whereas like if a different actor came on and played him more aggressive and more, you know openly abusive, I don't think it would have worked. So again,
No,
Boyer,
no.
who I always thought was a very underrated actor. I don't think he got as quite as many opportunities to really show how good he was, but when he did, he was always amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things, and one of the things about Bergman is, especially once you go past Casablanca, which obviously is what she's best known for. But the fact of the matter is, like you said, this is the one she won the Oscar for. She's absolutely riveting. I mean, you could also put this in the same vein of Hitchcock's Notorious.
Oh yeah.
But then a decade later, she's doing something like The End of the Sixth Happiness, which is completely different from this in terms of the type of performance she's giving. And then, of course, there's the work that she did with Roberto Rossellini, the Italian filmmaker who she later became got married was married to, and they and Isabella Rossellini is their daughter. So it's she was such a remarkable talent, and the fact that you get so many different layers to her in this, in a way, I mean, this is such a great showcase for an actress of her caliber because of the fact that she's given a chance to play a wide variety of things. I mean, there's obviously the romantic part, there's also the vulnerable aspects of the character, and there's also her kind of fighting back against Gregory's character.
Yeah.
And this is, it's like one of the films I'm thinking about with regards to this is, in a way, is Blake Edwards' Wait Until Dark, the adaptation
Uh-huh.
of that play with Audrey Hepburn.
Sure.
And I mean, there's a lot of, I do think to a certain extent, there's a lot of gaslight in that narrative as well.
Yeah.
Um, but no, it's a fantastic film, and Charles Cotton is really great. This is one of those things where it's like part of the reason we did this one was because of the fact that it's just as part of that Cotton discussion is because it's just a great use of him as a supporting character. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you get Citizen Kane; he's great in that. He's great as supporting characters in other films, but this is probably one of the strongest ones that he had in that respect.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, it's incredibly well cast. George Cukor, an amazing actor's director. He gets great work from everyone in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and with that, we are actually going to go to the 50s and 1952 to our third film on this discussion from director Vincent Minnelli. He was an accomplished filmmaker. He did many of the great musicals of the time, but this time we're going to talk about a Hollywood drama that really is kind of I think one of the early great examples of movies about making movies.
Yeah.
And that is The Bad and the Beautiful with Lana Turner, Kirk Douglas, Walter Bridgerton, Dick Powell, and Barry Sullivan. And I really first became aware of Minnelli in the Martin Scorsese documentary, Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese Through American Movies, and which is basically a 4-hour documentary where he looks at filmmaking in different genres, different types of filmmakers. And Minnelli is one that he brings up quite a bit in that one, with The Bad and the Beautiful being one of them, because of the fact that it is about filmmaking. It's also about the challenges of being a filmmaker, but also I think one of the things that's so interesting about The Bad and the Beautiful is that it focuses on a writer, a director, and a star's respective relationships with producer Jonathan Shields, played by Kirk Douglas, and how they got involved with him as filmmakers, and then how they each had falling outs with him. One of the things that's interesting about that, though, is that yes, we see that Shields' behavior towards all three of them is despicable, but we also see how he kind of responsible for launching all of their careers in a large way.
Yeah. This was another one that was great to return to. I think for anyone looking to get a glimpse of what people on the inside say that Hollywood is really like, you have to watch this film, and I think you have to watch Sunset Boulevard. Both of them, and both of them, for Sunset Boulevard 1950, here, Bad the Beautiful 1952, both of these films seem as fresh and relevant and on the money now as they were released in the 1950s. There's a kind of I think it's easy to dismiss a movie like this as just a cynical look at Hollywood, but it's kind of they're cautionary tales about how, I mean, this thing that people want, Hollywood, this idea of Hollywood, that it's not a place, it's a state of mind, and even when you reach a level of success, it's kind of like, how do you hold on to it, and how do you, and who do you have to step on along the way? I always thought that movies like Sunset Boulevard and The Bad and the Beautiful were more realistic look at the industry, whereas a movie like All About Eve, I always thought was kind of a soap opera. If we ever have a discussion about the 1950s Oscars, I would be like that Sunset Boulevard would be Best Picture over All About Eve, but that's a different discussion. But revisiting this again, Kirk Douglas is fantastic in this film. This is where Minnelli was able to get out of him all of that internal rage and cynicism and anger that the young Kirk Douglas really had. I think he kind of lost that in the 60s, because I think that Douglas, in his early years, he himself said he was kind of like the character of Midge that he played so memorably in Champion in 1949, that he was kind of fighting for that respect. And I think that in that same time, Jonathan Shields, his character in The Bad and the Beautiful, even though he top of the food chain in Hollywood, he's still fighting for that as well. And so you see that in Douglas. And no, it's no one can chew the scenery better than Kirk Douglas, but here he actually keeps it restrained, and he's actually I actually find him quite terrifying in moments, like in that, like, this guy is a guy who can make or break careers with a snap of his finger, and and that just seems very, relevant to what we've seen in the news in the last couple of years with the Me Too movement and many of the characters that were featured very prominently in that movement.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, and yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about Douglas not really being over the top. I mean, even the one scene in this movie I would argue is where he's probably most over the top, which is the
Yeah.
scene with Lana Turner, where he's trying to break this facade that she has this idea about her father that she has. Even that's not terribly over the top in the way that we think of Kirk Douglas being.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It can be terrifying, and we can kind of see where Georgia, the Lana Turner character, can be a bit intimidated by it. But at the same time, he's also doing what he finds something in her that he's trying to get out, and a lot of this is manipulation to get what he wants. Because one of the things about Shields in this movie, it's kind of interesting, is the fact that he did not he doesn't necessarily he kind of starts the movie out on top and then he has to find his way back up because of gambling issues. So he basically, that's how he gets involved with Fred, the filmmaker who they make a lot of B movies together and all this stuff for Harry, the Walter Pidgeon character. And they're starting to gradually make their name for themselves. And Fred has this passion project he's wanted to do forever. And of course, the thing that breaks the camel's back with him and Jonathan is the fact that Jonathan takes the credit for it and basically cuts Fred out at the knees when it comes to this project.
Yeah.
And so, now granted, we find out Fred has been an Oscar-winning filmmaker and stuff like that in the subsequent years, but still it stings because of the fact that, I mean, we certainly feel a little bit more empathetic towards Fred than we do Shields. And that's one of the things, and it's funny because of the fact that in a way, the structure of this movie is almost like Citizen Kane, where it's basically people remembering their history with the main character, the Jonathan Shields and Charles Foster and Kane, and the reason for this big meeting that all three of these characters are having with Harry is because Jonathan's trying to get a new production up. And each one of them have rejected. Like, no, I'm not interested in working with him ever again.
Yeah.
And this is as much about Harry trying to convince them to work with Jonathan again.
It's interesting, movies like this where when I was watching this, it made me think of the new Seth Rogen series, The Studio, of all of the very, very funny satirical look at Hollywood and all of the stuff that people have to go through on a daily basis to make movies. And as I watched the film again, it was kind of funny in certainly this film is not a comedy, but there were things that were just kind of funny in comparing to The Studio. And of course, thinking in terms, I also thought of Citizen Kane, because I double checked to make sure that I thought that Greg Toland was the cinematographer like he was, but he was not the cinematographer. But I thought that it did take a really nice, dark, deep dive into the obsession of these characters and how it is.
Yeah.
And it's all about the obsession of, you've reached the top of the mountain, how do you stay here? And that's what who are you willing to push off the top of the mountain or step on or steal, lie, cheat? Because, there's so much about Hollywood that we just don't know. that it's all like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that it's all a place of dreams. But there's a lot of people that have had, dreams crushed. And I think Minnelli, this is my favorite Vincent Minnelli film. I think this is his most effective film. And I think a lot of that has to do with the casting across the board. You have Kirk Douglas, Dick Powell, Gloria Graham, who's wonderful, who won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, and Lana Turner, who I don't think was ever really regarded as. I don't think she ever had a part as good as this. Again, I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the other parts she had were not her fault, but were kind of melodramatic, kind of soap operas, and she was effective in those films, but I don't think she was ever really taken seriously. But this movie, I think, and this performance, I think, is a reminder of how good she could be when in the right situation.
Yeah. No, and it's funny. There, a decade later, Minnelli would do another film about filmmaking called Two Weeks in Another Town with Kirk Douglas, and it's funny. It's like I haven't watched that one yet. I definitely want to. Um, but it's funny because of the fact that it's like I thought it was a true follow up with Kirk Douglas back as Jonathan Shields, but it's not. It's completely different character.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious to see about that. And there are so many other terrific uh, Minnelli films. He did Meet Me in St. Louis. He did The Bandwagon. He did An American in Paris. Gigi is what he won the Oscar for. Um, 2 weeks in another town. But yeah, I mean, Band of the Beautiful was terrific, and we haven't talked about Dick Powell plays the writer, and he is a college professor who has written a book that Jonathan wants to option the book into the movie, and he basically it's funny because watching him and Bart he brings Bartlow, the author, the writer character, in to write the screenplay, and Gloria Graham, who he mentioned, plays his wife, and there's a tragedy regarding the wife,
Yeah.
and but what we also see is during the production, Shield's ego getting the best of him to where he fires the director and then he basically takes over filming himself, and we get this great scene where they're in a screen room watching the film, and he kind of realizes what he did, and the fact that it just isn't working. He's telling Harry, shelve this thing. Like I don't want it anywhere. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's funny because of the fact that it's like it's the downfall of him in his hubris, but at the same time, he also has this realization that I'm the reason this movie failed, and
Yeah.
I wanted to be the reason it succeeded.
And that's heartbreaking because
Yeah,
the fact that he went in with good intentions, but again, it's like just you kind of lose sight of like you kind of like why are you here? Why do you want to make this? Do you want to make this? Do you want to make a lot of money? Do you want to win awards? Do you want to, or do you want to tell your story? And I think that he lost sight of why he was there, and that's, I mean, I think that's what makes the film so effective. I was thinking, as a nice companion piece to this movie, it's definitely more of a humorous bent, but I also thought about Blake Edwards's film SOB when I was watching this, and I hadn't seen it in ages. And it's kind of it's more of an open attack on specific individuals. And Blake
right.
Edwards got into a lot of trouble with that film. I mean, he's openly attacking like Robert Evans and Lou
Yeah,
Wasserman. I mean, it was not subtle. It,
no, I've heard that
but I
much
like it.
about SOB.
Yeah, but I like it because, you know, And Robert Evans even said years later, he said, I got a kick out of the film. He said, I thought Robert Vaughn, he said, I thought he should have cast me because, you think about this again, this thing called Hollywood, where it's not a place, it's a state of mind. It's something that we build up for ourselves. It's kind of like what,
Yeah.
you hear about like actors, like when people say to an actor, "Oh, you've made it." Well, what exact? I've never understood what that phrase means. Making it into what? I mean, if you're making it into something where you're making $20 million or $200 a week, I mean, if that, I think you watch these kinds of movies like Sunset Boulevard, Bad and the Beautiful, and SOB, and you wonder where's the joy? Like,
Yeah.
why are you here? But it's compelling because we keep coming back to it. We keep coming back to, I mean, Sunset Boulevard has been made into a musical, and Bad and the Beautiful. I think I'd love to see a remake of Bad and the Beautiful. I think this would really, a look at the industry from this standpoint with a modern touch. I think it would
Yeah.
be definitely worth seeing.
It would certainly be a different look at it because of the fact that, I mean, obviously the studio system is not what once was. I mean, it's
Yeah,
now basically run by billionaires and corporations who are all about the almighty dollar, which, I mean, look, I mean, studios have made films for money since the beginning of studios. I mean, that's just the cold hard truth of the industry.
yeah,
But the fact of the matter is, it's one of the things that I love, especially in the writers sequence of the Bad and the Beautiful, is that I mentioned that Shields fires the director he's hired uh, because of the fact that he doesn't appreciate the vision. He doesn't have the same vision of the film that the director has. And I think one of the things that's so wonderfully humbling to Shields is that what it basically shows is that not everybody can be a director. Just because you can produce a film doesn't mean you can direct it.
yeah.
Just because you have a specific vision does not necessarily of a film does not make it the right one. And I mean, I think that's something that so many people now like we can appreciate about films, especially films made within the studio system now, where
Oh,
it's like
sure.
you feel there are some movies where it feels like the producers all over it as opposed to a director's vision of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Jonathan Shields is probably a mix of Daryl Zanuck and all of those studio heads who they knew what could sell to an audience, but
Yeah,
getting but they weren't always right. They probably fired people who but it does come from a place of like, yeah, like they're not artists, or they're
no,
not seen as artists. They're seen as suits, the people who are looking out for the buck. Which,
yeah,
hey, we all want to make money, but also it's like, and I've been in conversations with people, over the years that about like, you know, can you make art and make money? And I mean, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you don't. But I think here Jonathan Shields is interesting that there was a part of him that wishes, I think, that he did have the talent to be a writer, a director.
yeah,
And that's the thing is, all those guys, like, they reach the top of the mountain and they want to be taken seriously. They don't want to just be, like, oh, like I'm the person that signs the checks, or who green lights everything. I want to be with a project from the ground up.
yeah, absolutely. And no, I mean, Bad and the Beautiful is just fantastic. Again, if you're a fan of films about filmmaking, I mean, we mentioned a lot of them here. This is a fantastic one. I mean,
Oh,
contemporary ones I love. I love Ed Wood. I love Bowfinger. I mean, I've talked about both of those over the years.
Bowfinger.
And I
Yeah,
mean,
Bowfinger. Bowfinger
it's
is good.
yeah, and it's just one of those things where it's like this genre is this type of story, Hollywood story is never going to go away.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I necessarily want a remake of Bad and the Beautiful, but I want to see. I mean, you mentioned the Seth Rogen series, The Studio, which I've heard fantastic things about. I have such a hard time getting into TV shows nowadays with everything I'm doing, but I know I've heard nothing but fantastic things about that. But yeah, I mean, I think the idea of making a movie about contemporary Hollywood and what that's like, I think you get the right filmmaker behind it. I think you're definitely going to find something worthwhile. But I mean, they also have to have somebody who's it has to be somebody who's clear eyed about the industry as a Billy Wilder, as a Vincent Minnelli,
Oh
as a
yeah.
Blake Edwards was with SOB, and yeah, I mean, it would just be kind of interesting to see what that would be like.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Tim, once again, is always a pleasure to. It's a pleasure to have you on, as always. I'm glad we're finally able to have you back on, and definitely look forward to doing this again, continuing on with
Yeah.
this series.
Let's get
So
three
many,
more. Let's get three
yeah, so
more.
many. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. I've already got some filmmakers in mind, which we can talk about later. But yeah, Timothy, thank you very much as always. Where can people find you?
I am on Facebook, Timothy J. Cox. You type in and then you'll be there. And same thing on Instagram, using threads as well. And yeah, and
Yeah,
TikTok. So trying TikTok. Mostly just for the entertaining videos that come out, but
right,
I'll
right.
post some stuff there. But yeah, if you type in Timothy J. Cox, you'll likely find me.
Okay, and if you get a chance to see any of the films that Timothy does, his work is always work I enjoy watching. I need to get caught up with so many of yours. I've kind of gotten away from watching those because of how chaotic my schedule's been, but I definitely want to get back into watching some of your work. So thank you as always for joining me.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
I want to thank Tim for joining me on the podcast. As always, we'll definitely have him back on, continue this established classic series. I do think this episode was a great one because of the fact that it's like these are three filmmakers that are obviously not as are familiar to film fans, but maybe not as familiar to people who are just starting to get into classic cinema. And I think, and one of the things, because of the fact that we're trying to do like a film per filmmaker, we're going to start to get into some of these filmmakers that maybe you're not as familiar with. And I can't wait to continue that with Tim. Thank you very much, as always, for listening to Sonic Cinema Podcast. Check us out, as always, wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel, patreon.com/Sonic Cinema, as well as my main hub, which is always www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.